This is Making Better Decisions. I'm your host, Ryan Sullivan. Decisions are where rubber meets the road for organizations. Each week, we'll be learning from people who are on the front lines of turning raw data into better outcomes for their organizations. This show is sponsored by Canopy Analytic, helping companies make better decisions using data. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Making Better Decisions podcast. Today's guest got her undergrad in cybernetics at the University of Reading, went on to receive a master's in machine learning at the University of Colorado, did some research at UC Boulder's psych department using neural nets, more on that to come, has worked for massive names like Eli Lilly and SanDisk, was recently awarded the Top 50 Women Impact Tech Award by the Women Impact Tech Organization. This is an award for the top 50 impactful women in the field of IT and tech. Please welcome Director of Data Science and Advanced Analytics at Western Digital, Nimisha Morkanda. Welcome to the show, Nimisha.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you for the warm welcome. Happy to be here and excited.
Yeah, I am excited as well. So we like to start everyone with the same question. What is one thing you wish more people knew about using data to make better decisions?
Yeah, great question to start off with, and this is my favorite when it comes to data driven decisions. Also, is knowing the context of the data that you're dealing with. I'll give you an example, right? So you can relate, and the listeners also can relate. So if I gave you a data set and not label any of the columns that's there, and let's say I have a column that has numbers ranging from 20 to 120, and I don't tell you what it is, there is not much sense you can make out of that, right? But if I told you it stands for temperature, then there's a lot of information you can extract. You can put a lot of things into context, and you can convert the data from a number to information into insightful insights that you can actually then put it into practical use rather than just seeing it as a number. So I think knowing the context of the data is really important, and it is by far the most critical thing, in my opinion and my experience, to drive decisions based on the data that you have in hand.
One of the things that I loved about that answer was when you just mentioned going from a number to information. And we've talked a lot on the podcast about how there's this critical interface between the systems and the data and the reports that we build and some human being that makes the ultimate decision. And I think we've had the opportunity to have a lot of conversations about, okay, how can we make that information clearer and more obvious to the person? How can we present it in a way that prevents bias or incomplete understanding or, any number of problems that happen when you interface, a digital system with a human being? And so I think that one of the things that you're uniquely capable of talking about is that interface because you have background in understanding how machines work and think, and then transition that into psychology. So talk to me a little bit about that interface and a little bit about your research and how that applies.
Sure. Yeah. I think one of the most interesting work that I've had the chance to work with is kind of working on building models that help understand how human brain works. And
Mm,
I don't do much research continuing that area right
sure.
now, but back in that time when I did, the problem that we were trying to solve is, how does human memory work really, right? I mean, we are at a phase where we're trying to get ChatGPT to mimic and ChatGPT to respond like how humans respond when it comes to memory, remembering things historically, remembering the sequence of events that has happened, and so on. And that, I think, is still a challenge for a lot of AI models today. And the work that we were focusing on from a research aspect is trying to build neural network models that can basically help us understand how does human memory work. There are different ways human memory works, short term, long term, in a very simplistic fashion. And there isn't much information that you can extract in terms of the history, right? So, how do I remember something that happened 20 years ago? We don't have that kind of data that spans for that history. So, that becomes a real challenge when you're trying to understand how long term memory works because you don't have experimentation data that spans for a single person or a population for that long time. So that's where a lot of experimentation based neural network modeling comes. So what we used to do is we had experiments with rats that will help us kind of set up situations of how memory would work, how do they remember
Mm,
short term, long term, and so on. And that's how we had some kind of a foundation, and off of which we can then build neural network models. So the area where neural network model really helps is you can simulate the same kind of environment in multitude of events and multitude runs. So this kind of basically offsets the problem that you have with not having a data for like 20 years for a same population, right? So you're repeating what would happen in that long time frame in simulations, which is where I think AI models can help kind of make that interpretation without having to rely on a historical, long decades of data that we typically will lack. So I think memory is one aspect. There is a lot of research. My favorite is in, offsetting or understanding how, things like Parkinson's, dementia, and those kind of diseases work, right? And because that's still, I think, from a medical aspect, a lot of them are unanswered.
mm,
And being able to simulate how our brain works when there is dementia or Parkinson's, for example, then helps to simulate it in a neural network model, and we can get insights that then can help the medical professionals to come up with appropriate solutions and even trial and experiments. Right? If you have something that you want to try, then how effective is that solution or approach is something that AI models or neural network specifically can help.
yeah, I love that. That is unbelievably interesting to me. One of the things that I'd be interested to know is taking that understanding that you developed from the portion of your life that was involved with research and combining that with the portion of your life that's been very focused on analytics for business purposes. You kind of see both sides. I'm wondering, what recommendations do you have for someone to help bridge that interface gap, right? We have the technologies, the data, the systems, all this stuff. Even if it's built perfectly, it has to interface with a human. What recommendations do you have for data professionals for making that go smoother?
Mhm. So I think again, this I'd speak from my personal experience, right?
Mhm.
In a lot of practical scenarios, no one tells you use this data to solve this business problem, right? You're often presented with here is a business problem that I'm trying to solve. Here is a challenge that we have, and I need an answer. They don't tell you to solve this problem, use data A, B, and C, use analysis X, Y, Z, and then tell me what the answer is, right?
Yeah.
You, as a human, is at the position where you're a data professional and you need to basically probe the right questions back at the business to know what exactly they're asking for. And once you have that clarity, so I think probing the question is very critical and important as a data professional, because you need to first understand what's the business problem that they are trying to solve and they're looking to answer. And once you have that back and forth clarity, Then comes the challenge of you as a data professional looking at, okay, what data do I have available, right? What data does it make sense for me to use? And how good is that data? And a lot of times, again, in practical scenarios, a data that you have in hand probably is not that great to answer the question that you have. Then comes the challenge of, okay, how can I, mine the data to get to my endpoint? And there might be challenges in that process too. And the bigger challenge, I think, once you have identified those pieces, is how do you convert what the data tells to answer the business problem that you have in hand. And a lot of times they don't translate A to B directly. It's
Mm,
not very direct. You have to put a story together. And that's where you, as a data professional, again, bring that expertise. And I think that's where my earlier questions answer also comes in, right? The context. You need to know what the context is of the data and the business problem so you can basically tie them together and put a story back to say, okay, here is what the data is saying, and here is what it means in terms of the business language that you're trying to solve. So I think that kind of end-to-end thought process as a data professional is really important in my opinion.
yeah, I could not more strongly agree. I think there are actually a lot of functions that reporting and people that are competent with data and the tools surrounding data fulfill. And I think there is, in certain places, this idea of you're kind of a cost center. We request specific dashboards. We want you to go make us a dashboard. You go build us what we ask for, and then we go off and we do everything with it. And, obviously, I would generalize and say that if you take all of the decision makers at most influential companies, you're talking about a relatively competent and intelligent cohort of people.
Hmm.
Hopefully. Yeah. I mean, that's at least been my experience. So there are reasons for ending up in a structure like that and, specialization of skills and, all of these things. However, where I have seen analytics make the largest impact is when the centralized analytic function functions not only as a developer, but also as an advisor. And
Hmm.
those can be two separate roles. It depends on how the organization is structured. But I really strongly agree with you that that advisory capacity, where you have a cross functional team of people that are all bringing different pieces of expertise, as opposed to like an assembly line of like business ask question, ticket, developer builds, QA. That it's like that. Hey, what's the real question? What are you trying to do here? Talk to us about the business problem. And then I might know all the pieces of information that you may not know we have. How can I put that together? What's the right analysis? So for me, that can turn what's sometimes viewed as a pure cost center into something that actually drives tangible value and realizable return.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the lesser the gap is, or the closer they talk to each other,
Yeah.
the better you can solve the problem, right? Because then you avoid miscommunication. Someone says something, the other person understood a different way, and it's natural as humans to,
Yeah.
and I think having that ability to cross clarify and ask questions and make sure we're speaking the same language, even though business and data speak different languages, I think is, yeah, really important. I may I ask a question?
Of
I was,
course.
yeah. So you've heard from different professionals, right? In
Yeah.
terms of what's the biggest one thing that you see as data being important to drive decisions. What is by far your, from all the answers that you have got, what is by far your perspective of what's most important?
Yeah, I think first off, I appreciate the way that you asked that question. So it's for me, there's kind of like a histogram in my head, like a little bar chart for all my data viz nerds out there of, frequency of kind of categories of answers. Um, what my perspective is, I would sum up in 2 sentences.
Hmm.
Number 1, business is hard, and number 2, it is all about currently human beings. So what I mean by that is the idea that data or analytics or some individual report or AI or one model or anything like that is just going to be this like silver bullet that just makes it rain money from the sky in perpetuity and we don't have to think and it's one click and it's just a sat like these are marketing messages to me.
Yeah.
Business is hard. Doing anything well is hard. It takes smart people, it takes hard work, it takes dedication, it takes a long-term view. And even with all of those things, it is sustained effort that creates excellent results. The second piece is it is all about people. If I had that histogram of kind of the frequency of answers, I would say the 2 that I get the most are kind of garbage in, garbage out.
Hmm.
Um, which true.
Yeah.
Um, and I would say first, second, but, kind of front runner would be it's all about people. It's all about the relationships. It's all about that close collaboration. Again, if you have like a room full of smart, dedicated people that have a North Star and they're putting consistent hard work towards getting there, you're going to see something incredible along the way. But if we have, here's a half-baked idea and I throw that in a ticket and then someone who's non-technical is in the middle and, like that a lot of some of these problems that we see sometimes with the process, you see things go sideways, you see them cost a lot more money than is needed and the result is, either too late or too expensive or doesn't really match what the business user needs.
Hmm.
So for me, it's really about crafting relationships across the teams and then engaging in close collaboration with those people. I definitely agree that there's specialization of skill sets and that is economically a good thing. Um, However, I don't think that specialization should result in siloing. So we should have specialized people, but they should work closely with one another to get good results.
Mhm, mhm. Absolutely. Yeah, I love the last part that you mentioned, right? And I think this is something I personally believe as well is that even though as data scientists or data professionals, your expertise lies in data, it doesn't mean you should not take an effort to understand the business side of it and understand the language that they speak, right? So that you can, and I think likewise for the opposite also, right? So I think the more everyone's familiar about what others are doing than the language they speak. I think, yeah, totally agree to that. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So for for all of the listeners, we do a little prep call before this, and I always tell people that they're allowed to ask me questions. I think that would make for great conversation. And you're the first person to take me up on it. So I appreciate you
Oh.
making this more conversational and friendly and easy and approachable. One of the things that I want to pivot us to is I would say that your experience is fairly deep, right? Within the nerd community, you have some serious street cred. So obviously AI is taking the world by storm right now. And I want to be clear, even though I'm a little bit um glib or flippant about this, that's not really the entirety of how I feel. Like there are absolutely incredible, very cool technologies and applications. And to sleep on really any of them would be a really horrific business decision. However, I can't help as someone that like actually understands how neural nets function and transformers function and you know all of these other things like it can't help but feel that there is a little bit of an over focus on just LLMs right now. And I get that. I get why. It's really revolutionary. It's been a giant leap for society forward. However, I think that there are a lot of cool applications for non-transformer neural nets or other machine learning algorithms. I would love to get your take on, okay, I am a business leader that's responsible for making decisions. I may or may not have, a master's degree in machine learning. How should I think about balancing the investment in AI-ifying my business? How should I, think about what are the right tools? Where should I put money in order to expect a good return on investment and not just throw good money after bad?
Absolutely. I think it's one of the most asked things by business or companies because, like you said, right, AI revolution, I think, is so talked about that you can't just sleep over it. You need to brace yourself and be prepared. What I typically recommend is, yes, you need to keep up to speed of what the AI is, and I don't know if most of the listeners know, but AI actually started back in the 1950s. So it's not something that it just happened to evolve in the last decade or two. It's been there for more than 70 years. There's been a lot of groundwork from a foundation perspective that has been done in the 60s, 70s, 80s from research, neural networks, natural language processing, and all of that has been there for a very long time. And I think I would give credit to ChatGPT for making it kind of widespread in terms of
Sure.
letting people know what AI is, right? I mean, to me, Google Translate and Google Search itself was a big leap. I think that kind of became more of a smoother transition from people's perspective. But if you see how Google Search works and Google Translate does, it does a pretty good job of understanding language, right? And ChatGPT made it more conversational, taking it one step further. So I think it just appears at the superficial level that it all happened in the last decade or two or very recent times, but it did not happen overnight and it took several decades. So I think that's one of the first fundamental things I hope people understand and relate to. And with that background, right now, if you think of what is happening with I think, like you rightly pointed out, everything is so centered around Gen AI, LLMs. Everyone wants to build a chatbot. Now, whether the chatbot is what solves your business problem or not is what is often kind of buried under you trying to catch that bandwagon, right? So, for business professionals trying to make the decision, my recommendation is take a step back, evaluate if AI is the best solution for what you're trying to solve, right? Define your problem state, and there are a lot of frameworks that help you evaluate if AI is the solution and how do you measure. One of my favorite is what's called the 5P framework, where you start with your problem statement, you define clearly what you're trying to solve, and you see if you have the process in place for it. A lot of times you might have very nice ideas, very appropriate ideas for AI to be the right solution to solve, but you don't have the process from a data and infrastructure standpoint, then there's not much you can do. Data is what powers AI, right? I mean, it's pretty much like your fuel powering the car. If you don't have the fuel, then there's not much you can get with the car, even if you have GPUs or the infrastructure. So I think from a process standpoint, evaluate if you do have the data that you're requiring to answer the business problems. Then comes the platform, which is the infrastructure. You need to have the infrastructure, and it's quite expensive from an infrastructure standpoint. And I think that's another thing that's often underestimated is the cost involved to set up an infrastructure, be it an off the shelf that you're investing with big cloud companies or building your own infrastructure. There is cost involved. And then comes the people part. Are your people ready? to adopt AI? And are your people skilled to adopt AI? And if you don't have, if both the answers are no, then how are you going to transition without losing that skill that you already have? And how do you get to solving and adopting AI without losing your people's trust? And I think people relationship to get to that point is really important. They need to have the confidence that AI is not taking my job away, but I need to embrace it in a fashion that I am empowered to do better things with AI coming into the picture. So there's a lot of upskilling that might be required. And my final, even though it's last, but my favorite is performance measurements. Need to have clear metrics that you can basically say, okay, I have this business problem. I'm going to invest so much into solving this through AI, and this is how much it's going to cost me from an infrastructure, people, and all that perspective. What is my return on investment? Is the return on investment something that I know how clearly to measure, right? Do I have clear metrics, either from a financial perspective or operational efficiency? What exactly am I achieving with the solution that I'm in building, right? So I kind of use this 5P framework that says, okay, here are things that I need to lay out, and this can then help me determine if my path is right, or do I need to step back and just simply use a SQL database to solve the problem, right? And a lot of times it's actually true, right? You don't have to just use Gen AI because it's you want to show that you're using and adopting AI. So I think that evaluation is very important.
Yeah, I love the tangibility. Thank you for sharing that framework. I think that's such easy advice to follow because it's so clear and procedural. Um, yeah, I loved how you talked about some of the tools that were out there and how cool they were. Um, I do agree with you. Chat GPT has captured the public's imagination for good reason, and I think that it has also shown the public and investors what could be possible, and so that started this really, really cool development of all of these people building all of these tools, which is only good for society and for businesses. It's very exciting. But, you mentioned one which was Google Translate, and I remember, this was years before GPT was huge. I loved the video function. So I don't know if you're familiar with this, but my wife and I would be traveling internationally, and you could take your phone in Google Translate and like point it at a street sign
Hmm.
that was in Chinese, and it would just like, and like on your phone, it shows as if that street sign was in English.
Yep. Yep.
I remember just being like, and it was like video, like you could move it around and like look at a new thing, and like the letters would just
Hmm.
change. It's like, oh my gosh, this is so
Yep.
cool.
Yep.
I'm telling you, the internet is going to be huge. It was so unbelievably cool. But you're absolutely right. Like we can go back and we can look at, some of like the earliest research on, um OCR and the neural nets that they were using for that stuff.
Hmm.
Which for any listener that's not familiar, that's like taking a camera connected to a computer and pointing it at, characters and having the computer actually know what those are, which was a really hard test. That's why when we try to prove to some website that we're actually a human, the biggest test is like, hey, what's in this picture? Is this a letter? Is it a truck or
Right.
whatever? Because computers are, getting much better, but not really good at that stuff. So one of the things that's important, I think, to cover in this space because of your background is there's like the set of tools that people are familiar with, right? We have one side of the spectrum, which is like pretty traditional data stuff. Okay, do you really need like a model? Does it actually have to learn for itself? No. Okay, well, just, let's build a query or a database or just connect a couple things. Bada
Right.
bing, bada boom. Like this is a report. On the total other end of the spectrum is, yes, absolutely. What you need is like this complicated multi-layer neural net that's going to do all sorts of, advanced cognitive function. We're wheeling in the PhDs. Like, let's build it. Let's go to town. For me, in the middle is what's really interesting to talk about right now because the database and the simple report stuff has been covered. and the super complicated hardcore stuff is completely blowing up right now. For me, it seems like there's a space to talk about, hey, what about like a simple random forest? That's machine learning. That's super valuable,
Yeah.
but people don't talk about them. So I was wondering, what are some of the tools? And obviously, I don't want to go way far into the weeds, but just like maybe, just one or two things and like what the use case is to help put those out into the market so somebody might know that there's a middle gap and some cool solutions that can be had there.
Yeah. I think that I think you're very right in that we had this traditional database kind of stuff, and the middle part, in my opinion, we've been doing it for quite a long time, right? I mean, I would say in industry at least for 10 years, we've been building solutions using things like random forest, gradient boosting, tagging algorithms, and so on. I think that space, just for whatever reason, did not attract a lot of people. It just, I still remember back in those times when you would propose that you could solve this using a random forest or a neural network model. People would be like, "Ah, I don't think that's needed. Let's just go our usual, like regression models, and that will be, what helps explain." And then with ChatGPT and complex things, I think the rightmost extreme is what's getting attention. And
Yeah.
I think it's more peer pressure, in my opinion, that people want to make sure that they are not feeling like they're left behind from that extreme right space where they have to say that they are doing advanced AI, right? Advanced ML. So I think the middle space is not seen as too cool anymore, unfortunately. But
Yeah.
to me, I think there are a lot of problems that those models can traditionally solve because they have proven to be very robust.
Yeah.
So for users, I mean, for listeners who are looking to get familiar with some of those tools, I would just simply start with Python libraries. Off the shelf, you get random forest libraries that you can basically use. And there are a lot of resources, be it GitHub and just Stack Overflow, favorite buddies for data professionals. You will get a lot of off the shelf solutions that you can just start off with, right? You don't even need to start with licensed applications, to be honest, in my
Yeah.
view, because you get a lot of off the shelf libraries that you can use in Python. And again, when it comes to visualization, I think there is a lot of tools that integrate with Python libraries, Power BI, Tableau, and all of those tools. Again, a lot of them have um, not non-licensed or community free versions that folks can use if they are looking to get started with. But
Yeah.
in a corporate ERP setting, I would say there are again a lot of applications that you can use. I know AWS has a lot of applications that you can um, buy off the shelf and leverage for end-to-end analytics. And I mean, Tableau, they're also doing a lot of innovation. I've seen Alteryx is another tool, and they do. I think a lot of these tools originally started with a very focused. We're focused on visualization, but with the AI bandwagon coming into the picture, they're also doing a lot of innovation in terms of expanding that space where they let you build models along with the visualization and let you get end to end without having to rely on a third party tool or a third party application to get your model development, and then this integrates with that. So I think something that does end to end would be another great option for again companies that are looking to adopt.
Yeah. So I love the advice of, hey, if you want to expand your capabilities and you want to start solving some hard problems, I couldn't agree more. Python right now is the obvious move. just to make it a little bit more tangible, give me maybe just like one or two use cases, like a type of problem that can solve that a database couldn't.
Mhm. So I'll tell you from my work perspective, right? I mean, I work for Western Digital, and what we do is we're building storage devices, hard disks that go into your laptop servers and so on. And we're producing millions of it in a day. And if you look at our manufacturing process, uh, any product manufacturing for that matter has several tests that are run for the products before they get shipped out, right? And
Yeah.
if you combine all of that from a hard disk perspective that we're manufacturing, we're talking of millions of products combined with millions of parameters that get generated from several tests that you're running. A database is not something that can really handle that kind of a load in terms of getting insights.
Mm,
Ultimately, for anyone that's manufacturing, what they want to make sure is they're not shipping products that are not of good quality to customers. So you want to be able to find things that are not up to the mark before it gets out of the door, and that is a very practical use case in my view of a large data set that just a database cannot handle. You need a little more sophistication in terms of being able to look for outliers in your data set. And the biggest critical challenge is doing it in a snap of time because you want it to be done as you're manufacturing, right? You cannot wait for a week or 2 weeks for the analysis to be complete and then say, oh, this product is, it looks a little outlier. So it has to be done very quick and fast and almost has to be integrated as part of the process. So I think that's kind of one great use case that I would suggest. And if folks are listening are interested, I would recommend looking at the fourth industrial revolution, which is kind of where a lot of innovation from manufacturing aspect is happening, where AI intersects manufacturing and how can we make the factories operate much more efficiently and much more sustainable. That's another big piece to it because you want to be also cognizant of the sustainability factor while you're driving efficiency. So there's a lot of innovation and practical use cases that are in that space that I personally see, innovation at the peak.
yeah, I love that. I do, some flavor of event detection or combinations of events coming out of like these monster swaths of IoT, like,
Yeah,
1,000 sensor readings off
right.
3,500 sensors every second, and that's, it really does get out of control. You almost need like a database for just the events that are coming out of that stuff.
Exactly, exactly.
So that I absolutely love that as a use case. One of the other ones that I'll share with the listeners that to me is most tangible to every data professional. For any of the listeners who kind of back in the day sat through me doing a training class, one of my favorite lines when I'm teaching somebody about getting into analytics is that visualization and reporting is essentially about creating buckets and then comparing the buckets. Like if I try to abstract it all out, that's really what it is. And ideally, we want to ensure that those buckets are a fair comparison and the things that are put in them accurately belong in that bucket versus another bucket, and that the calculation is identical across buckets. If we do a good job of that, then that means that the analysis is viable. It can actually properly inform things. So for me, categorization is essentially how you generate your
Mhm.
buckets, whether that's one year versus another year, or one product versus another product, or whatever the case may be. There are many times where we want to categorize groups of things, and that categorization isn't something that comes out of a system, or it's extremely time consuming to manually do, or whatever the case may be. There are a really, really cool set of tools for clustering, grouping, categorizing that is extremely time consuming and inaccurate to have humans do. and is extremely efficient, super researched, super hammered out, in that kind of machine learning that lives in between databases and, chat GPT level stuff. So that's my example.
Yeah, great.
One of the things that we love to do, so especially after having so much conversation about the intersection of data and business and then humans, is give everybody the opportunity to get to know you as
Mhm.
a human. Tell us a little bit about yourself outside of work.
So I live in Colorado, which is home to mountains. So
Yeah.
outside of work, I love hiking, spending time in the mountains. We are lucky to be living, 30 minutes. You drive to the west and you have mountains. So that's what I love doing outside of work. And in terms of community engagement, I do engage in a lot of women empowerment activities. I do provide mentorship to folks who are early in their career, looking to switch or go from individual contributor to more of a leader. And I also engage in providing scholarships for a lot of underprivileged girls who are looking to get a college degree and they're struggling because of their financial situation. So
Yeah.
that's one of the most fulfilling things that I do. And thus far, I've done about 20 plus girls, get their college degree and see them transform from, the uncertainty of, oh, would I even finish high school, to them graduating with a college degree, get a job, and learn how that financial independence is. And I think the financial independence automatically gives them the intellectual independence too. So they feel more
Mm,
confident about, okay, I know how to survive in life by myself. And set them, feel that they are empowered. So those are some of the things that I do, and I do engage with a lot of universities locally to kind of help them give a perspective of what is happening in the industry, right? I think when you're looking at research, and I've done research in an academic setting, you kind of, it's not so much that you're siloed because you want to be siloed. I think it's just the way the nature of academics works a lot of times, that you don't get to see what's exactly happening in the industry, and bridging that gap is very
mhm.
important. So I do engage with universities to give them insights on what's happening in industry, more of an industry perspective. And so yeah, those are some of the things that I do that are outside work that I really enjoy.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. Obviously, you know, bridging the gap between academia and business is awesome, and I think that creates great results for everybody. But, I think the real secret sauce, with some of the other stuff that you were talking about, especially in an episode where we talk about the interface between humans and data and technology and all of that stuff. That really is the area where all sorts of different biases come in, and to me, the best defense that we have against bias is kind of like diversity of thinking style and background. Like, the more different people you have looking at a problem, the more opportunities to solve that problem or to overcome that bias you have. So the more people and the more diversity that you get into this space, particularly with data, it just seems like mathematically obvious that this is like a fantastic idea. So
Yeah.
thanks for your service work in that regard. If anybody has heard anything that they like today and they want to follow up and learn a little bit more, whether it's about, some of the business stuff or maybe some of those initiatives that you were talking about, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
LinkedIn is obviously the best, and
Yeah,
I'm sure you'll attach the LinkedIn link. So yeah, definitely connect on LinkedIn, and definitely happy to chat further.
absolutely. I can't thank you enough. This was like such an incredible blend of like research and hardcore stuff, but it kept it at the perfect level where it's digestible and usable to a lot of the listeners and a lot of the data professionals that I interact with. I think that this episode is going to be like a consistent resource for people who are really trying to navigate a tumultuous time in data and AI. So, Namisha, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to share your your expertise with me and all the listeners. Thank you so much.
No, thank you for having me, and it was a great chat. And thank you for answering my question too. I know.
Yeah. Thank
So
you
it
for
was,
being my first question asker.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, it was good to get your perspective. So thank you for sharing that, and thank you to all the listeners too.
Yeah, I actually wanted to just do the same thing. For anybody listening, especially if you've listened all the way to the end here, thank you so much. If you liked what you heard, please tell a friend, go on, leave us a review, hopefully a good review, like, subscribe, share, do all that stuff that everybody tells you to do. It really does help keep the machine moving and it helps get this information to more people. So thanks again for listening. Namisha, this was awesome.
Great,
Thank you
thank you.
again so much. This
I
has been
hope.
another episode of the Making Better Decisions podcast. Thanks for listening. That's a wrap for today's episode of Making Better Decisions. For show notes and more, visit makingbetterdecisions.live. A special thank you to our sponsor, Canopy Analytic. Canopy Analytic is a boutique consultancy focused on business intelligence and data engineering. They help companies make better decisions using data. For more information, visit canopyanalytic.com. There's a better way. Let's find it together and make better decisions. Thank you so much for listening. We'll catch you next week. Peace.